Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. Pakistan is confronted with a civil war that it never thought it would have to fight. After having supported the Taliban for decades with arms, intelligence and strategy, an offshoot of the Afghan Taliban called the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is wreaking havoc on a scale that no one within the Pakistani security establishment could have predicted. Consider this: since the beginning of 2025, more than 700 attacks have been carried out by the Pakistani Taliban. That is an average of more than 2 attacks every single day on the Pakistani security establishment. Now, despite the best efforts by the Pakistani security agencies, the fact remains that the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, also known as the Pakistani Taliban, seems to be growing in both the scale and intensity of their attacks. But does the Pakistani Taliban have an end game? Now, the answer is it does. Having sworn allegiance to the Afghan Taliban, the Pakistani Taliban wants to bring an end to the Pakistani state as it currently exists, and then to impose its own narrow interpretation of the Sharia law on Pakistan. At the moment, a tenuous ceasefire has been agreed to between the Afghan Taliban and Pakistan. The differences between the Taliban and the Pakistani state go well beyond the question of the Durand line. There are deep ideological differences. So how is the Pakistani state confronting these challenges? Our next report gets you the details.
आप मर्द है कि अगर आपके सीने में मर्द का दिल है, आपने माँ की जो है अपनी माँ का दूध पिया है, तो हम इंशाल्लाह को आज आएंगे। फिर आप इतनी से जो है मेहरबानी करें कि जो आम फौजियों को आप भेड़ बकरियों की तरह बेचते हो, इनके बजाय आप खुद भी आया करें, ताकि हम आपको जंगों का मजा चखाएं, ताकि हम आपको ये बताएं कि जंग कैसी लड़ी जाती है।
This could be a line straight out of Bollywood potboiler, but it is actually an open challenge by the TTP commander Kazim to the Pakistani field Marshal General Asim Munir. In wave after wave of attacks, the Pakistani Taliban has wreaked havoc on the Pakistani security establishment, and the Pakistani military is now forced to hit back. On the 24th of October, 8 TTP militants were killed and 5 others injured during an intelligence-based operation in Pakistan's restive Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The operation was carried out in the Wanda Sheikh Allah area of the Laki Marwat district. In a separate incident, unknown assailants blew up a newly constructed government girls' primary school in the Tank district, bordering South Waziristan. In September, the Pakistani security forces raided 3 hideouts of the Pakistan Taliban armed group near the Afghan border, triggering fierce clashes that killed at least 19 soldiers and 45 TTP fighters. In another clash in the Lower Deer area, 7 soldiers and 10 rebel fighters were killed in a shootout after troops discovered a militant hideout. The Pakistani military has accused Afghanistan of providing safe havens to the Pakistani Taliban, and although a fragile ceasefire has quietened the guns along the Durand line, the Pakistani Defense Minister Khwaja Asif has said that the ceasefire now hinges on what the Afghan Taliban does.
This was very clearly spelled out that there won't be any incursions and TTP will not have any facility on their soil. We kept on repeating, and obviously they deny it, but in an implied way, both the countries, Turkey and Doha, Qatar, they pressed upon them that this is the main bone of contention.
The Center for Research and Security Studies, an Islamabad-based think tank, said that the year 2024 was the deadliest year in nearly a decade for Pakistan. The data revealed that 2,526 people were killed in attacks, including nearly 700 security personnel, more than 900 civilians, and approximately 900 armed fighters. The majority of these attacks were carried out by the Pakistani Taliban, The TTP has long been waging an armed rebellion against Pakistan since its emergence in 2007. The Pakistani Taliban have been involved in some of the most high-profile terror attacks, including in the assassination of former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. In fact, an estimated 70,000 people have been killed in terror attacks unleashed by the Pakistani Taliban since 2007. The Frankenstein monster, nurtured by Islamabad and Rawalpindi, is now knocking on its gates. The Pakistani Taliban is using the exact same tactics that were used by the Afghan Taliban in the 2-decade-long insurgency against the Americans, and no one at this moment can predict the outcome of a grueling conflict between the Pakistani state and the Pakistani Taliban.
On Friday, the United States' Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced that an overnight US strike against an alleged drug vessel ostensibly operated by a Venezuelan drug trafficking gang killed 6 male narco-terrorists in the Caribbean Sea. The latest military action brings the total number of strikes by the Trump administration on alleged drug traffickers in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific to at least 10, leaving at least 43 people dead. Now, members of the US Congress, both the Democrats as well as the Republicans, have now raised concerns regarding the legality of these strikes and have questioned President Donald Trump's authority to order them. As a result of the US military campaign, regional tensions have flared up, with Venezuela accusing the United States of plotting to overthrow President Nicolas Maduro. Our next report gets you more details.
Nicolas Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker.
Maduro's reign of terror continues. He is one of the largest narco-traffickers in the world.
Are Venezuela and the United States of America on the cusp of an all-out war? Well, the oil-rich but economically troubled Latin American nation finds itself increasingly in the crosshairs of the United States of America, the world's mightiest military. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, has long accused his foe,
we took it out.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, of being the leader of a drug trafficking organization, a charge Maduro denies. Ratcheting up the military and political pressure, the U.S. Justice Department, in August, doubled a bounty for information leading to Maduro's capture to an astounding $50 million.
The Department are announcing a historic $50 million reward for information leading to the arrest of Nicolas Maduro.
Over the last few months, the U.S. military has bolstered its forces in the southern Caribbean through the deployment of additional naval vessels and thousands of U.S. Marines and sailors, ostensibly in an anti-drug trafficking operation. Since early September, Washington began carrying out a military campaign targeting alleged drug trafficking boats, though it is yet to release evidence that its targets were smuggling narcotics. On Friday, the United States' Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, announced that an overnight U.S. strike against an alleged drug vessel, ostensibly operated by a Venezuelan drug trafficking gang, Tren de Aragua, killed 6 male narco-terrorists in the Caribbean Sea. This latest military action was the 10th such strike on an alleged drug vessel, which have resulted in the deaths of at least 43 people. On Thursday, the U.S. President Donald Trump had lauded the creation of the Special Task Force with an aim to permanently eliminate the presence of cartels and violent gangs in the United States.
In a matter of weeks, the task force has made the largest number of arrests of cartel leaders, operatives, and gang members in American history, more than 3,000 and counting. That includes members of the ultra-violent New Generation Cartel, the Sinaloa Cartel, the LNFM Cartel, MS-13 Cartel, and you know MS-13, the gang, and Tren de Aragua, another beauty. That's a group of real garbage we have to deal with, that we shouldn't have to deal with.
Earlier this month, Donald Trump ratcheted up tensions between the United States and Venezuela by indicating that he had authorized covert CIA action against Venezuela and was considering strikes against alleged drug cartels on land in the South American country. The outraged and defiant leftist Venezuelan leader, Nicolas Maduro, had decried coups d'etats orchestrated by the CIA and had ordered military exercises. On Wednesday, Maduro doubled down, claiming Venezuela has 5,000 Russian-developed man-portable surface-to-air missiles to counter its forces deployed in the Caribbean.
Cualquier fuerza militar del mundo.
Venezuela is going through the greatest threat that has been seen on our continent in the last 100 years. 8 military ships with 1,200 missiles and a submarine target Venezuela.
Para garantizar que
Responding to the threat of covert CIA action, Venezuela's defense minister said on Thursday that any CIA action against his country will end in failure.
podrán meter no sé cuántos cuerpos.
They can send I don't know how many CIA agents on covert operations from any corner of the nation, and any attempt will fail just as they have failed until now.
Y cualquier intento fracasará.
Though Trump has, in the past, claimed that he is not looking at regime change in Venezuela, he has wasted no opportunity in accusing Maduro of stealing last year's Venezuelan presidential election and has called him an illegitimate president.
Cumplir y hacer cumplir.
The U.S. naval buildup in the Caribbean and strikes in international waters against suspects who have not been intercepted or questioned illustrates that the U.S. military action is not only about drug trafficking, but instead about exerting military pressure on the government of President Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela.
The Khartoum International Airport has been shut since fighting erupted in mid-April 2023 between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, leaving a trail of destruction across the capital. In March earlier this year, the Sudanese army had managed to recapture the capital from the powerful paramilitary. But the drone attacks by the Rapid Support Forces targeting the military and civilian infrastructure has continued. On Monday, Sudan's Civil Aviation Authority had said that the airport will reopen on Wednesday. But from the very next day onwards, the paramilitary once again targeted the capital Khartoum and its main airport with drones. And it remains unclear whether the capital's main airport was successfully hit and the extent of the damage that was inflicted. Additionally, the most intense violence is now concentrated in western Sudan, where the Rapid Support Forces have laid siege to El Fasher, the last major city in Darfur that is not under their control. Our next report gets you more details.
Since April 2023, the Republic of Sudan, Africa's third largest country by size, has been torn apart by a game of thrones between the Sudanese army chief and the country's de facto leader, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces commander, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo. The Sudan Civil War, now in its third year, has killed tens of thousands of people, uprooted more than 12 million from their homes, and precipitated the world's largest displacement and hunger crises. The country has effectively been divided in two, with the Sudanese army holding sway at the center, east and north, whereas the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces are in control of nearly all of Darfur and parts of the south. Despite repeated international efforts to broker a ceasefire, both sides have exhibited little willingness to budge from their position. The capital, Khartoum, has maintained a semblance of relative calm since the Sudanese army retook control in March this year, though drone attacks by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces persist. On Tuesday, a day before the Khartoum International Airport was due to open for domestic flights for the first time in over 2 years, eyewitnesses reported hearing the sounds of drones over central and southern Khartoum and multiple explosions in the airport area. Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who visited the airport the same day, vowed to crush what he labeled a rebellion.
Soon, no one will be able to threaten Sudan because we are determined to crush this rebellion and to eliminate it and not give it a chance to return again.
The drone attacks targeting Sudan's capital Khartoum and its main airport have continued, putting in jeopardy the plans to reopen the airport. the Rapid Support Forces commander, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, has reiterated the claim that the RSF attacks military positions only, further issuing a warning that any aircraft or drone entering Sudanese airspace from neighboring countries would be considered a legitimate target. Since regaining control in Khartoum, the Sudanese army-aligned government is gradually restoring services and relocating key institutions from Port Sudan back to the capital. According to the United Nations Migration Agency, over 1 million people have returned to Khartoum in the past 10 months. Many returnees, like 70-year-old Jamal Ahmed, who fled with his family to Egypt after the outbreak of war in Khartoum in April 2023, are now trying to rebuild their lives.
I returned from Egypt 2 weeks ago. I found my house looted. I found the neighborhood sick and in despair. There's no power or water now, and it's difficult to get basic services. But I decided to return home, to at least die here. Nowhere is like your home.
The returnees, who have come back with nothing and are in urgent need of support, struggle to rebuild their lives in a city lying in ruins, with frequent blackouts attributed to Rapid Support Forces attacks. What's worse, during this 30-month-long war, both the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces have been accused of war crimes. Unfortunately, in a country where nearly 25 million people, half of its population, are suffering dire food insecurity, the power struggle between the warring generals continues despite continuous mediation efforts.
The Russia-Ukraine war is at a critical juncture. With the onset of the fourth winter in this war, Russia is again systematically targeting the Ukrainian power grids in wave after wave of missile and drone strikes. In the latest development, the Russians claim to have captured at least 10 more settlements along the Ukrainian front line. Volodymyr Zelensky hasn't managed to get the long-range Tomahawk missiles from the United States yet, but he has the American President Donald Trump now more firmly on his side. Trump cancelled a second summit with Vladimir Putin and has taken a much more hardline approach against Russia through sanctions. The European coalition of the willing is making all the right noises by saying that Ukraine's security is Europe's security. But when push comes to shove, to what extent is this European coalition of willing to help Ukraine out on the ground? Our next report gets you more details.
42 months of Russian onslaught hasn't broken the back of Ukrainian defenses yet. In the last week, as these images from the front lines will show you, over 82 pitched battles were fought. More than 10 settlements have been wrested out of Ukrainian hands, and Russia claims to have hit more of the Ukrainian defense industry enterprises, transportation and energy infrastructure, and sites that were used for the assembly, production, storage, and launch of long-range unmanned aerial vehicles. Long-range, high-precision weapons launched from air and land-based platforms, as well as combat drones and Kinzhal air-launched hypersonic ballistic missiles have been unleashed on Ukrainian targets. Ukraine, too, has hit back with its long-range drones. As this video from the Krasnogorsk area of Moscow shows, Ukrainian drones have wreaked havoc by piercing through the Russian air defense systems. Trump's position on Russia has hardened. He has now imposed crippling sanctions on Russia's hydrocarbons, in a way that is expected to hit the Russian economy hard.
Yeah, it's a good question. Today is a very big day in terms of what we're doing. Look, these are tremendous sanctions. These are very big. Those are against their two big oil companies, and we hope that they won't be on for long. We hope that the war will be settled. We just answered having to do with the various forms of missiles and everything else that we're looking at, but we don't think that's going to be necessary. We would like to see them just take the line that has been formed over quite a long period of time and go and let's go home. Last week they had almost 8,000 soldiers killed. Many Russians were killed last week. Many Ukrainians were killed last week. We think it's ridiculous and would like to have it end.
Immediately after the imposition of sanctions, the Russian President Vladimir Putin said that dialogue is always better than war, but the American sanctions would not change Russia's ability to fight the war.
Of course, this is an unfriendly act towards Russia. This is an obvious thing, and it does not strengthen Russian-American relations, which have just begun to recover. Of course, with such actions, the U.S. administration damages Russian-American relations.
The Russia-Ukraine war is a nuclear tinderbox. Immediately after the sanctions, Russia put out this video of its forces conducting nuclear drills that included the practice launches of Russia's intercontinental ballistic missiles that can strike targets on mainland United States. It remains to be seen what impact the American sanctions will have on the Russian war machine.
The Republic of Peru has been rocked by anti-government protests for weeks. The protesters have been demanding that the country's political class should do more to combat high-level crime and corruption. Earlier this month, the Peruvian lawmakers had voted to impeach President Dina Boluarte on grounds of permanent moral incapacity. Her successor, Parliamentary Speaker Jose Jerry, became the 7th president to lead Peru in the span of just the last 8 years. However, Jerry's elevation to serve out the remainder of Dina Boluarte's term until the presidential election that is scheduled for April of next year hasn't placated the protesters. On Tuesday, Peru's interim president announced a 30-day state of emergency in Lima and the neighboring port of Callao. Our next port gets you the details.
Earlier this month, on the 10th of October, when an overwhelming majority of 118 out of 122 Peruvian lawmakers voted for President Dina Boluarte's impeachment and removed her from the presidency, the great expectation from her successor, Peru's Congress leader Jose Jerry, was that he would be able to stem crime. Boluarte's presidency since December 2022 was marked by protests and accusations of failing to curb crime, and she had already come up against multiple attempts to remove her from office. Following her ouster, Boluarte in a televised message struck an ominous note, cautioning that hidden forces were at play.
La delincuencia en estos días va a menguarse un poquito.
Surely crime will decrease a little in the coming days, because I have no doubt that behind this whole situation and all this orchestrated setup, there are certain interests and hidden forces at play.
Todo este aparato armado.
The newly appointed president, Jose Jerry, began his tenure in some style, leading an anti-extortion and anti-crime operation in the Ancon 1 maximum security prison of capital Lima the very next day. But were the protesters, frustrated by the authorities' failure to resolve a worsening crime crisis, impressed? On the 15th of October, less than a week after President Jose Jerry's accession, thousands of Peruvians poured onto the streets in Lima and several other cities, fed up with the country's political class.
We have come simply because we are, as I just mentioned, fed up with Congress, fed up with the legislative branch that is so difficult to remove, a whole bunch of issues that have not been resolved, and today everything has reached a boiling point.
As night fell, some protesters tried to breach the security barrier around Congress, whereas others in the crowd also hurled stones and lit fireworks. In a bid to disperse the protesters, the police in riot gear responded with tear gas. In the ensuing violence, at least one person, 32-year-old rapper Eduardo Ruiz, was killed and more than 100 others, both police officers and civilians, were wounded. On Thursday, Peru's police chief said that a police officer from the Criminal Investigation Directorate is believed to have shot Eduardo. The same evening, dozens of young people paid tribute to the 32-year-old rapper Eduardo Ruiz, with candles, flowers and banners rejecting Peru's new government. President Jose Jerry, a right-wing politician who has declared war on organized crime in an attempt to take the heat out of the protests, alleged that the peaceful demonstration had been infiltrated by criminals seeking to cause chaos. On Tuesday, the first major action meant to address the spiraling crime crisis. Peru's interim president announced a state of emergency in Lima and the neighboring port of Callao.
Fellow citizens, crime has grown disproportionately in recent years, causing enormous pain to thousands of families and also hindering the country's progress. But this is over. Today, we begin to change history in the fight against insecurity in Peru. The state of emergency approved by the Council of Ministers comes into effect at midnight and will remain in force for 30 days in metropolitan Lima and Callao, presenting a new approach. We are moving from defense to offense in the fight against crime, a fight that will allow us to restore peace, tranquility, and confidence to millions of Peruvians. Wars are won with actions, not words. Long live Peru.
Viva el Peru!
Under the state of emergency, the government can send the army to patrol the streets and restrict freedom of assembly and other rights. In a country experiencing an unprecedented wave of violence, with dozens of bus drivers, musicians and other victims murdered for refusing to pay protection money to gangs. Will the 30-day emergency prove to be a significant first step in the fight against organized crime?
And with that's a wrap on this edition of World at War. If you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.